Pope Francis continues to recover from double pneumonia in Gemelli Clinic in Rome. While the business of the Vatican continues, the National Catholic Register's senior Vatican correspondent, Edward Pentin, reports. And how might the Vatican's relationship with Communist China influence the next conclave? The UK Spectator's Damian Thompson will weigh in. Clinical psychologist, author, and EWTN radio host Dr. Ray Guarendi will share his new book, How to Get Along with Almost Everybody. We'll see. And I speak with Ralph Fiennes and Isabella Rossellini about their controversial Oscar-nominated film, Conclave. The world over begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. An important show for you this evening. If you'd like to comment, send me an X post. I'm at Raymond Arroyo, and make sure to check out Arroyo Grande Show on YouTube. Pope Francis continues to recover from his multiple illnesses in the hospital in Rome. If one can parse the often vague reportage from the Vatican, the Holy Father seems to be improving, if only slightly, each day. Meanwhile, the business of the Vatican and the Pope continue despite the Holy Father's precarious health situation. Here with a report, senior Vatican correspondent for the National Catholic Register and co-founder of the College of Cardinals Report.com, Edward Pentin. Edward, thanks for being here. For the last several nights, Cardinals, including Cardinal Raymond Burke, Peter Turkson, Gerhard Mueller, and others have gathered in Rome to pray the rosary for Pope Francis's recovery. The most recent medical update from the Vatican stated that Pope Francis's condition has only slightly improved over the last few days. Today, he alternated high-flow oxygen therapy with a Ventamask. Given the complexity of his clinical condition, further days of clinical stability are required before a prognosis can be determined. In the morning, the Holy Father dedicated time to respiratory physiotherapy, alternating with the rest. In the afternoon, after another physiotherapy session, he spent time in prayer in the chapel of his private apartment on the 10th floor, where he received the Eucharist. Then he resumed his work activities. Now, Ed, the February 27th morning update simply stated the Pope slept well during the night and is now resting. What are you hearing, and what is the overall perception of the Vatican's communications regarding the Pope's health and recovery?
Yes, well, I think Raymond, he certainly does seem to be improving, and I think that's clear. And I think that the talk about physiotherapy sessions shows that he is recovering, and they're taking it to the next step. But I think generally, I think the people have been happy, at least like that I've spoken to, happy with the Vatican's statements, although some do say that even though it's a lot of detail in them, and more detail in fact than I think happened when John Paul II was hospitalized, not all of it is necessarily relevant, and there's still many unanswered questions. For example, we don't know what type of pneumonia it was that he had or still has, and what drugs they're using in particular to treat him. But on the whole, though, I think people have been quite impressed by the level of detail that we have received.
What do you make of the Pope's sister arriving in Rome? I'm seeing reports that this is the first time she's visited her brother as Pope. She just arrived in Rome, and I'm seeing reports, Ed, that cardinals are also sort of flooding into Rome. Is that what you're seeing or hearing?
Yes, well, he has been receiving visitors. Of course, he received Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni just before he took a turn for the worse. And so he has been receiving visitors. He's been receiving visitors for most of this week. Cardinal Parolin has been to see him, the Deputy Secretary of State, Archbishop Pena also. So he does seem to be well enough now to receive visitors, to continue working, which also shows that he's recovering. And perhaps he could be discharged at some point. But then the question is, how weak is he going to be? How much can he really fulfill his duties, all the duties as Pope, or will they be severely curtailed?
Yeah, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But what do you make of the nightly gathering of the cardinals to pray the rosary in St. Peter's this week? Does it underscore the seriousness of the Pope's condition despite these reports? I mean, I can't recall a nightly consistent prayer vigil like this since John Paul II took ill.
Right. Yes, it is. It is fairly unusual. It is unusual. But I think it's interesting that they have started. I think it started on Monday, and they've been praying every day. And a big group of cardinals, really, from who are living in Rome. So it is quite significant, and I think it does show the seriousnness of it. Of course, it really responds to the turn for the worse that happened on Saturday, which was the feast of the Chair of St. Peter, when he was.
Yeah.
I think had that respiratory crisis, and I think it stems from there. But it'd be interesting to see how long they keep praying, because of course, if he does improve, that'll probably stop.
As you can see here, Cardinal Raymond Burke was also at that rosary. He's been there every night. I was very impressed to see this, Ed, because it's no secret to our viewers or anybody else. The Pope fired him from his position at the Signatura, bounced him from his position at Malta, reduced his salary, threatened to throw him out of his apartment, and then decided to backtrack on that. And yet, there was Cardinal Burke. What does it say about his character? To me, it's a great lesson in charity.
Yes, I think that's what a lot of people are taking from that. And it's very much in character with Cardinal Burke. He is very much of that character. He does he is very charitable. He does turn the other cheek. He lives the gospel. So in that sense, yes, I think it's very much reflective of him, and as you say, all the things that have happened to him, really a kind of persecution in a sense. Which has led to, which gives greater strength really to how he's responded and how he's reacted to this.
Yeah. Ed, I have to tell you, I've been reading these reports as you have and waiting for them to drop, the morning report, the afternoon report, or evening in your time. I have to say, I'm a little rattled by the consistent nightly rosary prayer vigil, and now seeing the Pope's sister arrive in Rome. That, to me, is kind of counter-programming, if you will, what we're hearing in the official missives coming out of the Vatican press office. Should we be looking for those other extraneous signs besides what we're getting through the Vatican press apparatus?
Well, I think it's partly because the Gemelli Hospital where the Pope is, I think they're probably concerned that they're being especially cautious, I would say, just in case he does take a turn for a worse. So they don't want to jump the gun and say that he's getting much better when they're still very cautious. They really don't know whether he could take a turn for the worse. So that's my impression, that they're being very, very cautious, very circumspect, because they don't want to make that mistake. Of course, they'd rather not have him, I expect, die in hospital if that's what's going to happen. And often popes have, if they have taken a turn for the worse, or they usually end up dying usually in the apostolic palace, so and not in hospital.
Yeah.
So that may be what will happen eventually. But yes, I think that's the concerns of the Gemelli, I think.
Yeah, well, I'm keeping my eyes on all of it. I take it all in, and then you have to kind of sift through it and discern what you're being told from what you're seeing, and usually the truth emerges. I mean, we remember how John Paul II was serene, quietly resting until he wasn't any longer. And I mean, so we do have to take all of this with a grain of salt. Ed, throughout all of this, since entering the hospital on February 14th, Pope Francis has been at various times making appointments, directing public statements. For example, on February 22nd, the Holy See press office, and this has not gone reported very much, they said this morning Pope Francis experienced an asthma-like respiratory crisis of prolonged intensity, which required an administration of high-flow oxygen. Meanwhile, the Holy See press office bulletin reflected the following, same day: appointment of special envoy to the celebrations of the 1000th anniversary of the coronation of King Bolslaw Chobri. Resignation and appointment of Metropolitan Archbishop of Dakar, Senegal. Resignation and succession of Metropolitan Archbishop of Corrientes, Argentina. On and on. You see them all there on your screen. My question is this. That's quite a flurry of activity while the Pope is in hospital and having a major health crisis. Your thoughts?
Well, I think a lot of these appointments, a lot of these decisions have been taken a long time in advance. Certainly the episcopal appointments, they're often taken months, weeks in advance, and they're only disclosed now. So I think that's part of the reason. I don't think these have been done necessarily while the Pope has been in hospital. So I think that's probably an explanation for a lot of that. But he is doing work, but of course we don't know what kind of work he's doing.
Right. Well, that's the point. They say he's resuming work, and we are seeing these, and look, another example, you had the press office health updates and the press office bulletin from Monday, this past Monday. And, they said, look, the Holy Father's clinical condition, despite its severity, has shown a slight improvement. In the evening, he called the parish priest of Gaza to express his paternal closeness. And that same day, the Vatican bulletin revealed 4 new episcopal appointments, 2 in Italy, 1 in Spain, another in Brazil. What are you hearing about the level of business being conducted? I mean, this seems to be going on at a rather brisk pace. And look, it's not just the episcopal appointments, Ed. It's surrogates to go to special events. It's announcements and statements. I mean, surely the Holy Father isn't doing all that on his own.
No, and he did receive, I said earlier, the visits from Cardinal Parolin and the Deputy Secretary of State, and so I'm sure there's definitely delegations going on and delegatory aspects of this. So he's not doing it all, and he's getting help.
And Ed, as you mentioned, we also should point out the Pope met with Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin, as you referenced, as well as influential Jesuit canonist Cardinal Gianfranco Ghirlanda. Could these visits account for some of that activity, that steady stream of announcements and appointments that we're seeing? And do you expect to see more in the way of appointments?
Possibly, but as I say, they were probably made a long time before, and if that's the case, there won't be many while he's been in hospital. But as you say, he has been receiving visitors. They denied that Cardinal Ghirlanda went to visit him, but then I've heard other things too, that perhaps there was some contact. So we don't know, but that's an interesting aspect, because Cardinal Ghirlanda is his top canonist, and there is talk of the Pope wanting to change aspects of the conclave, and so whether that's been part of it, we don't know. But yeah, he has been receiving quite a few visits, important visitors. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, this is going to be touch and go, is my guess. I mean, remember, John Paul II, who was a vigorous man until the Parkinson's, attacked his body in such vicious ways. Pope John Paul II was 84 when he died. Pope Francis is 88. And in John Paul II's case, he was in and out of the Gemelli until he finally went to the Apostolic Palace and they brought medical care there. Do you expect Pope Francis to be discharged from the hospital anytime soon, Ed? I know they're already talking of canceling, the Ash Wednesday appearances.
Yes, I mean, I remember when John Paul went in, and he was very poorly before he went in, and I think people realized that this was probably going to be his last few months. I don't think that seems to be the case with Pope Francis. He doesn't have, of course, Parkinson's, so it's not quite so serious then. And that John Paul was going in and out of hospital, as you say, for 2 months. And I think we could well see Pope Francis being discharged. As I said earlier, it's really interesting to see how strong he'll be once he is discharged. And somebody pointed out that perhaps he'll have to, carry an oxygen tank or something around with him as a precaution. But we don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see, though, whether he is discharged soon and how he copes with that and what he can do.
Edward Pentin, we will leave it there. You can find Ed's The College of Cardinals Report at collegeofcardinalsreport.com. Ed Pentin, thank you as always.
Thank you, Raymond.
Here with his thoughts on Pope Francis's health situation, as well as analysis of how the Vatican's secret agreement with Communist China could influence the next conclave, is Associate Editor of The Spectator UK and host of the Holy Smoke podcast, Damian Thompson. Damian, thank you for being here. As we've spoken about numerous times, that Vatican-China secret agreement remains a secret regarding the CCP's input into the appointment of Catholic bishops. It remains troubling. And you commented on a recent Daily Mail article that drew my attention. And the upshot was, given the Pope's health, there are conversations about his successor already happening. And you mentioned the 70-year-old Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin. He's really the custodian of that secret agreement between the Vatican and Communist China. And the Daily Mail calls Parolin a moderate. You would say what?
I'd say, in which universe is he a moderate? Why don't you ask the 10 Chinese bishops who have currently disappeared, we don't know what's happened to them, about whom Cardinal Parolin has said not one word, presumably because he wants to keep his allies in Beijing happy. It's also the reason why the Pope had said not one word about the disgusting persecution of Christians throughout China and the Uyghurs, presumably on the advice of Cardinal Parolin, the Secretary of State, who in addition seems to have adopted some of the imagery, some of the language of sinicization, the dreadful Maoist ideology imposed on the whole of China, but the Catholic Church and Catholic masses, or travesties of masses that are now officially recognized by Rome. I tweeted something out yesterday. I was disgusted by this Daily Mail article, which yet again gave us the familiar story of a plot by conservative cardinals to frustrate the reforms of Pope Francis. And we had the usual suspects, Austin Ivory and John Allen and a couple of others. It's as if even representatives of mainstream, normally reliable publications, broadsheet, tabloid, online, run immediately to hardline Team Francis propagandists for their interpretation. But on the subject of Cardinal Parolin, he is indeed a front runner. He has been campaigning, and I use that word advisedly, for this job for a very long time. He's been making friends. He's built up an enormous network of allies, about which we don't know an awful lot. We do know that he was in charge of the Secretariat of State during some of the most appalling money laundering and botched investments in the entire history of the Catholic Church. But let me quote the man I regard as, with all due respect to Cardinal Burke, the greatest living cardinal, who was Cardinal Joseph Zen, the 94-year-old former Archbishop of Hong Kong. And Cardinal Zen said in an article in 2020, this about Cardinal Parolin. I read the speech given by Parolin, Secretary of State of His Holiness in Milan on October the 3rd. It was sickening. He is in no way stupid or ignorant. He told a series of lies with open eyes. The most repugnant thing was the insult to the emeritus Pope Benedict XVI by saying that he approved the then agreement signed by the Holy See 2 years ago, which is the same agreement in force now, knowing that Benedict certainly will not come out to deny it. It was very ridiculous and humiliating for the innocent Cardinal Ray being used once more to support the falsehoods of the most eminent secretary. Now, Raymond, when have you heard a leading cardinal, a hero of the church, one of the greatest heroes since Cardinal Mincenti, speak so frankly and with such titanic anger about a man who, to the horror of human rights activists, especially those specializing in China, is being spoken of as Papa?
Yeah. No, Cardinal Zen has appeared on this show and said similar things. Here's my question. Do you think Beijing will try to influence this conclave, and have they begun already?
Yes, I think so. But, Beijing does not reveal its hand, but we do know that they have tremendous assets, not least in the form of compromat. They've gathered an enormous amount of information about the sexual peccadillos of various cardinals, and knowing Beijing, they will use it. I mean, they've already had tremendous success in enforcing this vile secret agreement. And by the way, since when are diplomatic agreements in the 21st century secret? But anyway, they've already had such success that a communist apparatchik was able to basically appoint himself Archbishop of Shanghai, the most important Catholic see in China. And the Vatican knew nothing about it. And then Pope Francis had to retrospectively okay it because it would have been doubly humiliating if he'd tried to, if he'd said that this man could not take the job, given the deal that had been signed. It is the most astonishing and diabolical betrayal of the underground Chinese Catholics who for decades looked to Rome for protection.
Damian, it breaks my heart. Of course, Jimmy Lai, the great freedom fighter, a Catholic convert, languishing in prison and having to endure show trial after show trial to try to clear his name for a crime he really didn't commit. It was a ridiculous crime, being charged. But you see not only bishops, you mentioned them earlier, being vanished in all over mainland China. Those are the ones loyal to traditional church teaching and the papacy. And yet the Vatican is sort of undermining that. And let's be frank, on television, this is really the only spot where these people, our brothers and sisters in China, have been defended, and we've raised our voice about the tragedy, the travesty of their daily lives. And the fact that the Vatican, in lockstep with the regime in China, has allowed this to go on and enabled it is really the greatest scandal, I think, of the last, 12 years?
What greater scandal could there be than the Catholic Church, the Vatican, basically, in alliance with the Communist Party, dragooning faithful Catholics into services in which Jesus Christ is subordinated to the ideology of the Communist Party and the person of the Chinese president. It is an abomination.
Yeah, well, the herding of people into the patriotic association, that's one thing. But then when they begin to pervert the words of the gospel, the words of the Mass, where Xi is the cure to all your problems, Jesus Christ is just kind of a side character. This is a deep perversion of the Word of God, that you're committed to protect the doctrine of faith. The newly named Archbishop of Washington, D.C., Cardinal Robert McElroy, will be installed on March 11th. You recently wrote a column in The Spectator about that appointment. Damian, you're in the UK. What does the appointment of Cardinal McElroy to Washington, D.C., certainly the seat of power in the United States, what does that represent to you?
Revenge for Americans having the temerity to elect President Donald Trump. I think it's specifically revenge for the appointment, I think probably an excellent appointment, of Brian Birch as America's ambassador to the Holy See. And that the Pope should behave in such a petty way is deplorable, but not entirely out of character, I'm afraid.
One more story before we go. Pope Francis and the Vatican's charity office, Caritas, they're calling President Trump's USAID cuts, that's the United States aid, foreign aid, reckless, and that people could be killed, quote, killed, as a result of the interruption of millions of dollars from these grants. Catholic Charities and Catholic Relief Services in the United States have been laying off employees, cutting migrant and refugee resettlement programs in response to those cuts. On February 11th, just days before he entered the Gemelli, Pope Francis established a new commission for the faithful to donate funds directly to the Holy See, the Commission on Donations for the Holy See. Now, Damian, the Vatican already has Peter's Pence for that purpose. Now this new commission is established to raise general funds and also funding for specific projects of the Holy See. Your thoughts on this and the timing of its creation?
Who in their right mind would give a penny to the Holy See? Look what happened to the faithful Catholics who gave to Peter's Pence. Members of my family, members of your family, I'm sure. The money was used in recklessly irresponsible financial investments that end up costing the church billions of dollars. What the church bureaucracy needs and won't get, particularly if Parolin is elected, is a doge. And they're terrified of somebody meticulously going through the books and finding out how much money is being wasted. I am not saying that all the money spent on migrants at the American border and other parts of the world is wasted. No, I am not saying that. What I am saying is that just as in the United States, we have no idea how much money is being dribbled away on vanity projects, one of which was called the Synod on Synodality, until somebody goes through the books, and they are terrified of that happening.
Well, Damian, the last man who went through the books, who was Doge before Doge was cool, was Cardinal George Pell, and we saw what befell him. He found billions of dollars of waste and honey pots all over the place, and he was sent packing.
Indeed, and Libero Maloney, who was the Vatican auditor, was threatened with jail, because there are jail cells in the Vatican, for doing his job. So that gives you an idea of the scale of the crisis.
Yeah, that needs to be cleaned up to rebuild credibility, because we should be able to trust that those funds go to where they're intended. Damian, we'll leave it there. You can find Damian Thompson's commentary at spectator.co.uk. Thank you, Damian.
Thanks, Raymond.
This week, I sat down with actor Billy Baldwin on the Arroyo Grande podcast, and we talked about the political divisions in families and his new movie, which touches on the homeless crisis, No Address. And I also talked to him about his faith.
Watching you all these years, I've always thought you were motivated by your faith to speak out on these issues, particularly things like homeless and climate change, care for the poor, that was an outpouring of your Catholic faith. I know you.
My conscience, and it's my DNA, because that's all I ever knew, because that's the way I was raised by both of my parents. My father and mother did everything. My father was a teacher, a football coach. Yeah. He ran the youth club. He ran the Key Club, the Youth Council, Summer Rec, Winter Rec, the Little League, the Cub Scouts. He was my Cub Scout master.
He have time for you all. Wow.
No, he was doing that for us. He was our Little League coaches. He was our Cub Scout masters. He was doing that. So all I ever knew growing up is to give back and to be. My father was and my mother were titans, pillars, and if they didn't directly impact you, they indirectly, because my father was your brother's Little League coach or something from 1952 to when he died in 1983. Died young, 55 years old.
The entire Arroyo Grande interview with Billy Baldwin is on YouTube at Arroyo Grande Show, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We've got some great people coming up too. Visit RaymondArroyo.com for all those links. Relationships are tough. Even the strongest ties can be strained and broken altogether. How can we maintain and strengthen good relationships and successfully navigate the difficult ones? For answers, we're joined by clinical psychologist, longtime host of The Doctor Is In on EWTN Radio, author of the new book, How to Get Along with Almost Everybody. Please welcome back to the program, Dr. Ray Guarendi.
Well, Raymond, how are you?
Dr. Ray, let's start with married couples, which, let's face it, these are among the most important relationships we can have. And in your book, you state, quote, most divorces don't follow major dysfunction, abuse or alcoholism, adultery, mental disorders. Most divorces are the end point of a long-time interpersonal slide. Hurts and resentments have built upon themselves for years, end quote. Dr. Ray, how do you overcome those hurts and resentments and that interpersonal decline?
If you interpret what your spouse is doing, Raymond, as automatically hurtful, automatically critical, automatically offensive, automatically put down, you tend to accumulate this stuff. Spouses will come to me when their other partner will not come into the office for therapy. And I will say, okay, how can we make you less vulnerable to what's going on? Somebody can be nasty, Raymond. A spouse can be offensive or critical, but you don't have to absorb it. That's the key. Many people think because you act that way, I have to react that way. That's not true at all. One of the worst things I hear is the overused phrase narcissist and emotional abuse. Narcissist means basically somebody that's self-centered and difficult. When you call somebody a narcissist, and that's spousal language now, you call somebody a narcissist, what you're saying is you're beyond reach. I can't reach you. You're pathological. If you say emotional abuse, what you're saying is that nastiness, which in most cases is words, I have to absorb and feel abused, not necessarily. If Raymond, if you're going to be mean to me, I still have a lot of power to decide how much you're going to affect me. And that's what people have to understand. It isn't automatic. When you're mistreated, you don't have to be miserable.
Yeah, I was talking to a therapist not long ago, and she was saying that there's a danger when you label someone, particularly those you're closest to, a spouse, a parent, as a narcissist. But that seems to be the first card that's thrown down in a lot of therapists' offices. What's the danger of labeling someone that, you know, in a broad way?
Because I've decided you're now pathological. I have decided that there are personality parts of you that are irretrievable. And only a skilled therapist can get through to you. I can't. I'm just a layperson. Another thing we do, Raymond, is trait language. Trait language isn't necessarily pathological language. If I say, Raymond, you're thoughtless, all of a sudden, I've just broad brushed you. And you immediately get defensive because that's a nasty accusation. You're mean-spirited, Raymond. Well, you see what I've just done to my spouse? Automatically, they are not going to want to hear this. Rather than saying, why didn't you call me when you said you would? Instead of saying, you're thoughtless and you're inconsiderate. We use those kind of terms all the time, and I'll tell you, they are like pot shots at a relationship.
Dr. Ray, you discussed 3 conversation killers that contribute to interpersonal disharmony, whether they're marriages or otherwise. Here's a quote. High on the list of conversation killers are bragging, complaining, and know-it-alling. How can people avoid those killers, relationship killers?
You gotta be aware of yourself. You know, the saying is, oh, the gift the gods would give us to see ourselves as others see us. If you can't look at yourself and recognize, you know, I'm looking for every opportunity to kind of talk up myself here, and I'm noticing that people are pulling back. That's one. I had a mother one time tell me her little daughter was 9 years old, and she died of leukemia in the hospital with her mother there. Mother said, I never realized what that did to me. I can't listen to complaining anymore. When I hear people complain, or worse, when I hear them complain about their kids, it just jabs through my heart. So whenever you're complaining, recognize the person listening to you may be hypersensitive to those kinds of complaints because they wish they had those problems. Know-it-alling. I'm superior. I'm smart. My opinion is better than yours. And I'm waiting for you to say something so I can one-up you in the conversation. Those 3 things, if they're done with little bits and pieces, they can irritate an interaction. If they're done chronically, they can ruin a relationship.
You share in the book, quote, a 90s sitcom wrapped its plots around the everyday interplay of 3 generations, grandparents, parents, and children. The grandparents' marriage was marked by the mutual mindset, you're wrong, with the twist of a sentence, a talk fest could descend into a bicker fest. I guess, Ray, that's why they didn't call it Everyone Loves Dr. Ray. What are the best ways for families to communicate effectively and with charity?
Well, Raymond, they were going to have a spinoff. It was going to be Some People Sort of Tolerate Dr. Ray. That was our title.
Good. That
If you ever
worked.
notice 2 spouses sitting side by side, somebody will say, yeah, we went there Thursday night. No, it wasn't. No, you're wrong. It wasn't Thursday night. It was a Wednesday. Oh, okay. It was a Wednesday. So anyway, I drove up. No, you weren't driving. I remember I said I was going to drive. It's that kind of picky bickering that not only puts people listening to it ill at ease, but it just is it's a poke at a relationship. And marriages do this a lot. You don't have to correct somebody. Let them say that I was driving. I don't have to automatically step in and say, no, remember you said you didn't want to drive. Remember that? Pay attention. A lot of relationships do this, and it dings them.
Ray, for the Italians watching, and we are both the fellow sufferers, Italians have a way. I have a way. I'll point to myself, and I won't include you in this one, Ray. I have my face tells 1,000 tales, and sometimes people will come and tell me things, and I'm so frustrated by it. I'll eye roll or I'll make a face that's clearly not supportive, loving, or what's the term? Empathetic. Your thoughts on the visual cues we can offer those in our circle, and how that can undermine or destroy.
I came home one day, and my wife had given my daughter, my 13-year-old daughter, 2 hours worth of labor. I said, what did she do? My wife said she rolled her eyes at me. Raymond, you asked me a question, and I do this to you. I guarantee you're not going to want to air this interview. Those kinds of disdainful, I call them back looks, disdainful back looks convey a message of, you know, you're stupid or you're foolish. You actually believe that. What is wrong with you? And we can do that. I'll make this remark. I'll give a talk for an hour. Somebody will ask a question, and I'll say to them, if I said to you at your question, yeah, right. I guarantee you, whatever I said the previous hour, you would not want to hold on to because that guy's a jerk.
You give tips on how to give and receive criticism because sometimes that's necessary. Share some of those tips with us.
You're familiar with the phrase constructive criticism?
Yes.
That can be a stealthy tag word, Raymond. Hey, Ray, I'm just going to tell you now, I'm meaning this as constructive criticism, Ray. I think you need to pronounce your words a little more succinctly. Okay, I'm just saying this for your own good, Raymond. A lot of time, constructive criticism means, let me tell you what's wrong with you. Let me tell you why you're not measuring up. Unless you got a really good relationship with somebody, you better be careful about constructive criticism, because all too often I'm saying, I don't really like the way you do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and some people can absorb criticism easier than others, Ray. I mean, look, I remember, you know, when I was an actor back in the golden age, I had a theater coach, Stella Adler, who was, she was like a military leader. I mean, she was like a general. And she would send more of my peers to NYU psychiatric services than I think anybody in the university, because she was so brutal and personal when you did a scene in front of her. Now, I loved it because I took it in the spirit it was given, adjusted the performance, and gave her what she was looking for. But some people were just crushed internally. So I do think it depends. You have to gauge all of that depending on the state of the receiver. But you write something that I want to delve into a little bit. A difficult person can be self-myopic, meaning he doesn't see himself as difficult. If he did, he'd be less difficult. The longer someone has been difficult toward you, the wiser to confront less and ignore more. Dr. Ray, you see a lot of this in work environments where you have to deal with people you don't like, but you got to be there with them. You got to engage with them, or they don't like you. What are some tips for dealing with coworkers who are a challenge?
Let's go back to your mentor there in acting. Now, you knew she was that way, correct, Raymond? You knew what she was like. She was not going to change for you or anybody else, correct?
No, that's correct.
Okay. So you knew that. And part of the reason it probably didn't get to you as much as it did to your peers is because you expected it. It wasn't a matter of, I wish she would be different. I wish she would change. Why does she have to be like that? No, you knew that was her persona. And that's what I tell people. My mother-in-law's been making snarky remarks about my parenting ever since my first child, and we have 6 children. How long has she been doing this? 22 years. It still upsets you? Well, yes, she shouldn't do it. But wait, that's the way she's been. It's the way she is. It's the way she will be, to use Roy Hobbs. So, in fact, when will you get to the point where you say, what do I expect? And it doesn't impact you as hard when you expect, because you got plenty of evidence that's the way the person is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, most of these people are just jerks. We got to be honest. I mean, some people are just jerks that you encounter and have to encounter.
Expect, but it's not going to bug you.
But in the case of Stella Adler, or even a person in your field that you'd go to, that's a professional whose word you respect, and you're going to them for a reason. Stella had an enormous talent and an eye for talent. So when she said something, you adjusted. It's about having the humility to know the difference between a talented person of accomplishment and somebody who's just spouting off because they might hate you or have a bias toward you, I think.
Her ability was unquestioned, Raymond. Her style stunk. Okay, so if you can separate the two, if you can say she's instructive in her criticism, not destructive, but the constructive stuff, she may have a personality that kind of likes to lord it over people. All right, that's who she is. If you recognize what Stella is like, you're much less likely to be upset by her. When you continue to demand that she be different than she is, you will upset yourself no end because she'll give you plenty of ammo.
Yeah.
You know the
Yeah.
most common question I now get, Raymond, from not only folks
What?
in therapy, but everybody. Can you please tell me how to make somebody be different?
Oh, yeah. The magician question. Yeah.
Yes.
Turn them into a rabbit for me, please. I want to move on to something. In your book, you write something that I loved. In ancient Middle Eastern cultures, a slap on the cheek was a severe personal insult. It demanded a sharp response. Jesus instead instructed, if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Meaning, don't reflexively feel demeaned. Show the slapper he can't provoke you into wrath or retaliation. Every insult doesn't need to be answered. Dr. Ray, given the social media environment we and our children live in that is so toxic, those conversations online can turn into virtual street fights any minute of the day. What advice would you give our viewers about restraint in those circumstances?
Here's what Jesus was saying, I think, Raymond. The ultimate insult, you're sending back a message, you can't make me feel worthless. You can't demean me. You tried. You gave me a backhand slap across the face. You know my response? Here, do this. It wasn't pacifism. It was a nonverbal way of saying, you can't demean me because I won't let you. Same thing with social media. Raymond, you're big in the media. You probably get all kinds of stuff critiquing you and criticizing you, and some of it's awfully nasty.
Yeah.
My wife sends
Part of
those
the
to me,
game.
and I try to ignore them as best I can. But
Yeah.
our Lord, I think our Lord was giving a beautiful psychological lesson. Nobody has the power to demean you, and he used the worst example he could, if you
Yes.
don't let him. Here,
Yeah.
this shows you how much you will affect me.
It's great. It's a great approach. And it actually works really well, you know, because it takes the power away from the attacker in many ways, because they're not getting the reaction they want, which is often why they've begun the whole interplay in the first place. I'll give you the last
If I could
word.
give a characteristic to somebody, Raymond, I would say, especially Christians, I would want you to be unoffendable. We get offended so easily. Why? Well, because you shouldn't say that about me. I don't deserve that. I don't do that to you. That's not the way a good person acts. In essence,
Right.
what we're saying is, I don't deserve this, so therefore I get offended. If I recognize that anybody can say anything at any time about me, I will be less likely to be offended. If we use our Lord as an example, he committed no sin. And look what they did to him.
Right, exactly. Well, Dr. A, we will leave it there, and with apologies to my dear mentor, Stella Adler, but she did sit on a throne when she critiqued us, Ray, just to put it in context. How to Get Along with Almost Everybody by Dr. Ray Guarendi is available at bookstores everywhere and online, and you can go to EWTN's catalog at EWTNRC.com. Thank you, Dr. Ray.
Thanks, Raymond.
The controversial film Conclave has been cleaning up at the award shows all season long, taking home a BAFTA for Best Picture, the British Oscar, based on a book by author Robert Harris. It depicts the high drama behind the process of choosing a new pope. It's actually a thriller with an outrageous stunt ending, which many of you probably are aware of by now. It is now up for 8 Academy Awards at the 97th Academy Awards ceremony on March 2nd. I sat down recently with syndicated radio host and film critic Michael Medved to talk about the movie, but I also spoke with Conclave's director, Edward Berger, and 2 of its stars, Ralph Fiennes and Isabella Rossellini. Take a look.
There is a new film that you've surely seen ads for, and one that I've gotten a lot of questions about in the last couple of weeks, so I thought we'd do a report on it. It's called Conclave, and it purports to reveal the drama behind the process of choosing a new pope. The film is based on a book by author Robert Harris. It's a thriller with an outrageous stunt ending. For his take on the film, we're joined by syndicated radio host, best-selling author, Michael Medved. Michael, welcome back to the program. Delighted to see you. Tell me, I know you've screened this film. What was your expectation when you went in to see it?
Well, my expectation wasn't high because there's a long history of films about the Catholic Church that sort of view it as dark and conspiratorial and entirely negative. So the fact that the film concentrates on the Ralph Fiennes character, who is the dean of the College of Cardinals, and he's a very sympathetic character. However, you mentioned a stunt ending. This is an ambitious film. It's a serious film. The director, Edward Berger, previously directed the remake, acclaimed Oscar-winning remake of All's Quiet on the Western Front. The film is gripping and moving and fascinating until that stunt ending that you mentioned that ruins everything and is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, let's not give it away just yet. I want to build to it, and I'll do a little spoiler alert later because it's important in our discussion. But as you mentioned, Edward Berger, the director, he won the Oscar last year, and I sat down with him this week, Michael, to probe why he would make a film about this topic, a papal conclave, as his Oscar follow-up. Listen. Edward, you've said that there's an ethos to film making and that there has to be a reason to make a film. What was the reason in your mind to make this particular film?
Well, I was really interested about the ins and outs of a papal election, about what goes on behind those closed doors. Not necessarily only a papal election, but for me it stood as a larger political process. You know, it could have taken place in Washington, D.C. or within any big organization that's looking for the top job to fill, to see what happens when there's a vacuum of power and who wants to fill that, and what that does to the person, but also to what I really responded to, what my real reason to make the film is Rafe plays a character called Cardinal Lawrence that has struggles with sort of purpose or his reason for faith.
And Michael, another part of the difficulty here, the problem here, might be something that Berger referenced. He sees this as essentially a political struggle for the papacy, like Washington, D.C., he said. So this is more of a political or ideological battle than a spiritual undertaking. Did you find the characters here particularly well drawn? I found them kind of cardboard cutouts at a point.
Well, I think most of the characters, you're right, because they're people you're just meeting, and they're basically classified very simplistically in the film's terms as good guys or bad guys. But one thing that was fascinating to me was there was a very gracious treatment of Ralph Fiennes, who's one of the producers, by the way, who plays a character who is deeply sympathetic and sincerely religious. The difficulty is that because they are classifying the College of Cardinals as sort of separated down the middle by good guys and bad guys, what is fascinating about this film in a political sense is sending a message that what does matter in politics is not particularly your agenda or your platform, but your character. And the idea that so many of the caricatures on the College of Cardinals have characters that are deficient, that are hiding some guilty secrets in the past that do come tumbling out. That's a very difficult basis for a film.
Yeah, Michael, you mentioned Ralph Fiennes, who plays Cardinal Lawrence. He's the dean of this College of Cardinals, in charge of managing the conclave. He's also riddled with doubt. Watch. Ralph, you seem to be drawn to these types of characters. The End of the Affair, Faith Healer. I saw you on Broadway many years ago, even Hamlet. Is there something that draws you to these particular characters? I mean, this is a character wrestling with his own doubts. He almost elevates doubt to a cardinal virtue. I mean,
I think yes. He gives my character, Cardinal Lawrence, who's the dean of the Vatican. He's responsible for running the conclave, and it's his duty to give a homily, a sermon at the beginning, in which he emphasizes the importance of doubt. In this context, I think it's about being open. It's about avoiding certainty and rules and dogma it has an emphatic structure and says that this is right and that's wrong. I think he's saying we have to be open. We have to be open for all kinds of stuff that we don't know, and that's doubt, that's asking questions.
Now, Michael, there you have the theme that really does run through the whole film. Doubt and the repudiation of dogma and certainty. Compare this, if you will, to other religious epics like A Man for All Seasons or even Shoes of the Fisherman, where the certainty of faith beyond nature is what propels and powers those stories and those characters.
No, that's absolutely true. And you don't have to go that far back. There was recently, I thought, a remarkably good film made about the two popes, starring Jonathan Pryce and Anthony Hopkins, playing actually Pope Francis and the late Pope Benedict. And that film did not center on their greatness because of doubt. And that equivalent of noble character with the presence of doubt and uncertainty does seem to be one of the bases that leads to the film, as I indicated, and again, no spoilers here from me, but the end of the film is very frustrating. Even people with it are going to have that reaction.
Well, look, if my email is any indication, Michael, the final election of the Pope in this Conclave movie is going to infuriate serious Catholics. Because to Catholics, it's not about selecting a president or a king.
Or moviegoers. It's infuriating from an artistic point of view, not just a religious point of view.
Yeah, no, it ends up being a stunt and a total, in some ways, it does reinforce this idea, though, of doubt and certainty is an evil. You know, it does undermine that. But look, this is the selection for Catholics of a faith leader, a representative of Christ on earth, the vicar of Christ, who will protect the deposit of faith. Okay, here's the spoiler alert. Okay, I'm issuing this to all our viewers. The cardinal they choose in the third act is a biological woman with some birth anomaly. I asked the director, Edward Berger, Ray Fiennes, and Isabella Rossellini about this.
There is a visual power to the composition of these scenes, the drama of this. Here's the problem I think you're going to have, and I've heard from a lot of Catholics. You all were raised Catholic, all of you in some way, or had some association with the church. I know you're going to get ferocious backlash for this movie from faithful Catholics. Is that a concern for you as you were making it?
No. And to be honest, I doubt, but, you know, let me be surprised. I doubt that it'll be ferocious backlash. I hope it invites discussion, because all we need to do is discuss with each other, have an open discourse, be able to disagree with each other without hating each other, but learning from each other. That's the main thing about making a movie like this. You know, that there's opposing political forces. Who am I to say who's right or wrong? You know, in the end, this one person wins. But anyway, so I think, you know, we didn't try to make a, you know, critical takedown of the church.
But there's an awful lot of internal corruption here at play in this conclave.
Yeah, but
I mean, these guys are.
But this is documentation of corruption in the Catholic Church exists.
Oh, without a doubt, in every institution.
There are also other cardinals that are very spiritual.
But yeah, there are a few of those. But the question is, did you all have any hesitancy when you read the script about this may inflame tensions?
I mean, I felt the opposite of you. I feel that the film is incredibly religious, because the religions deal with the mystery, the doubt, the non-answer. And the film, once finally they have the answer, and yet the film ends with this incredible mystery and his answer, God made me this way. And I think it's incredibly religious and kind.
Now, Michael, I thought Berger said they were against saying what was right and wrong. I'm not so sure Catholics will feel that way, and I wonder if they or anyone would make a movie about, say, a transgendered grand imam being elected. Your reaction?
Well, there are very few grand imams who appear in this film, but though they do have, and again, not to give anything away, but one of the members of the College of Cardinals is a cardinal who represents Kabul, which I don't think is a reality in the current constitution of the College of Cardinals institution. Look, the idea is they come back to making a film about the world's most prominent and important religious institution, which is the Catholic Church. And they make a film about that institution where the organizing principle of the whole film, and you heard it right there from the filmmakers, is doubt.
Yeah.
And I think this is honestly a real problem in our society, and one of the reasons that people are so unhappy and so torn, and they all think that society is going in the wrong direction, because the highest virtue would appear to be, in the eyes of what we just heard from the filmmakers, the ability to feel doubt and uncertainty. And in terms of choices between good and evil, which sometimes are very clear in our world, and the idea of exalting the idea of a doubt above all other, quote, virtues, I think is dubious, to say the least. And for people of faith, including non-Catholic people of faith, I think this is a problem.
Yeah, well, basically, Conclave seems to suggest that all the things Jesus Christ taught are holding the church back. And if those things are overthrown, then the church can thrive. I mean, it's kind of a pagan's version of religion, all the ritual with none of the belief or dogma. You wrote an entire book years ago, Michael, about how hostile Hollywood is to religion and people of faith. I'll give you the last word and how this fits into that trajectory, if you will.
Well, it fits into the trajectory not because this is so much a focus of Hollywood or Hollywood movies or television shows or programs or anything in mass media. What is a focus in mass media is a portrayal of America where the importance of religious faith in the lives of people is consistently downplayed. One of the points I make in Hollywood versus America, that book you're talking about from 1992, is the idea that every year in this country, there are more people who attend church and synagogue than there are people who go out to the movies. And it's not really close, because despite the fact that, yes, people look at figures on church attendance, the majority of Americans still describe ourselves as believers in God. And the most people have some connection with and some identification with religious faith. And the fact that that is so underplayed in the depictions of American life across the country makes this movie worth pointing to, because it is, in so many ways, it's lavish, the sets and the costumes and the recreation of the Vatican, and there is a little bit of a sense of awe that is communicated here. All of that is going on, and yet the payoff is, as you rightly observed, I mean, I think very dubious, and one of those things that will frustrate moviegoers of every faith and of no faith.
Yeah, no, I was really looking forward to seeing it. I did see it. At the end of the day, I thought it was, it's a lot of black smoke. We're still awaiting the white smoke from Conclave. Michael Medved, thank you for being here. And you can listen to the Michael Medved Show. Read his columns at michaelmedved.com. Thank you. Here's my prediction. Only Isabella Rossellini will win an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. And though it's a beautiful movie, A Pope with a Uterus is silly, also offensive and against canon law. We need a holy father, not a holy person. That is all the time we have for now. Be sure to catch us next week. Actor and philanthropist Gary Sinise will discuss his late son Mac's second album of music, which is just amazing. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Bye now.